So now to go into the issue of the UN, of humanitarian aid, a little bit more in depth is my good friend and Vice President of NGO Monitor, Olga Deutsch. So welcome to Olga Deutsch, who is the Vice President of NGO Monitor, and you have been working for years on the issues of humanitarian aid, which non-profit organizations in the Gaza Strip, also Judea, Samaria, West Bank, are legit, which ones aren't. You've been calling them out insistently for years. Olga, make a little bit of seder, as we say, order in our heads. What is going on in Gaza Strip? What is failing? Why are we getting the blame? And who's actually distributing aid, if anyone?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Awesome show. Since the Oslo Accords in 1993, the international community, through humanitarian and other aid, has siphoned around $40 billion to the Palestinian Society. Now, it's not only Gaza, right? We're talking about Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And it goes through humanitarian aid and all kinds of other aid packages. Some of it goes directly to the Palestinian Authority and their different offices and ministries, but a lot of it goes to and through organizations that portray themselves as humanitarian or human rights groups. And the October the 7th did not happen in a vacuum, right? It happened in a reality in Gaza where no one condemned the massacre of October the 7th, because for 30 years since the Oslo Accords, we have seen a steadfast process of radicalizing the Palestinian society, where it's okay to commit October the 7th. Now, a lot of that has happened either thanks to the humanitarian aid or without the international community checking properly.
No accountability.
Very little. First of all, let's start that there's very little transparency around the issue, right? We all talk about UNRWA, but UNRWA is only one out of 24 UN agencies operating in the Palestinian Society. Now, the same issues that we see in UNRWA, right? And there's so much evidence coming out in the public since October the 7th. So this whole thing is a ticking bomb. Now, there is a dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There's no question about it. Anyone in their right mind who sees the images is devastated, right? Over what's going on with the civil population. But there's got to be a way to discuss these issues somewhere in between saying no aid at all and aid at any cost. And that's basically what's happening right now. They're saying we want to continue sending humanitarian aid at any cost, no checking, because there's a humanitarian crisis.
In other words, where is the holdup? Is it the quantity? Is it the distribution? Is it that Israel is checking every aid truck? Where is the problem?
Well, there are two, the days after, right? There's the day after physically in Gaza, who's going to run Gaza administratively, who is Israel going to cooperate with, what's going to be the role of the Abraham Accord countries and so on. But there is the day after for the international donor community, and what is the aid, how is the aid going to be delivered? Now, there is securing the aid physically, right? Whether it's food packages or fuel or whatever it is. And there's a bunch of solutions that I'm not an expert on physically tracking, putting tracking devices and so on, checking what goes in, what goes out. But there's a whole other part of the humanitarian and other aid that is being delivered in non-physical ways. Did you know that political advocacy is a legitimate category of humanitarian aid? Meaning that a lot of what we think is humanitarian aid, and we envision food packages and flour and, clothes or medicine for the civilian population, actually goes to political advocacy projects. So let's connect the dots. When there is the ICJ court case, right, against Israel by South Africa, there's at least 4 organizations who enjoy humanitarian aid sitting in the audience, on the South African side. There is Al-Haq, the biggest Palestinian human rights organization, whose advisor co-authored the claim. So the entire apartheid, genocide, libel, it's coming from these so-called human rights organizations. And to put
that are funded by the world.
Oftentimes. And all under the auspices of we are providing humanitarian development, human rights aid To put that in an even broader context, there is an ongoing attempt to vilify Israel, but more broader, the entire Jewish community in what we call the human rights space, right? So every place where we're supposed to talk about justice and protecting the underprivileged and so on, we are being slowly but systematically taken out of those spaces by pushing for this agenda that Israel is an apartheid, that there is a white supremacy here, or as some organizations, even Israeli groups, have called it Jewish supremacy, and so on and so on. And what we have seen after October the 7th is that trend on steroids, right? Because what used to be apartheid libel now is genocide libel, ethnic cleansing libel, and so on. So what happened at the UN Security Council vote yesterday also doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? So you have a completely morally compromised organization that is the United Nations.
Everything you say, first of all, I could listen to you talk all day, but yeah, she's fantastic, fascinating. And I just, I'm sitting here wanting to interrupt, but I didn't. But everything you say is interesting and valid and all those great things, but we can't muddy the water, because right now we're in an existential fight, in my view, for the future of our country, its safety, its security. And not only that, we don't want to become the South Africa of the world. We don't want to become diplomatic and trade pariahs.
Yeah.
And so all of those things that are valid and true aren't for today. What's for today is the global fixation on the lack of food and medicine, and they don't want to hear any of this other stuff. That's what we have to fight, focus on, and win, and we're not winning.
There is only as much that all of us in the public, non-governmental sphere can do, and we can do a lot. And if October the 7th or the aftermath of it has proved one thing, that's definitely that. But there is also a diplomatic vacuum coming out of Israel. I think we need to do much more of it, and in a much more sophisticated manner to address that complexity. But all the while, just with the last sentence, we must not forget the day after, meaning that political processes, and you know best, you know this, Vivian, best, they take a while. So to work with the governments, the donor, the international community, in order to make sure that that after the war, in the post-war Gaza, the aid packages are transparent, vetted properly. If there's a sign of misconduct or abuse, that there is a sanction in place. We need to start working on these plans today with the governments, because these things take a long time.
Olga, you have a magic wand, let's say. NGO Monitor, you've been researching, you've been advocating, you particularly do a lot in Europe, but your organization does a lot everywhere else. 2, 3 quick solutions that could happen today to solve this aid crisis in Gaza.
We as a collective, we need to speak up and say, this is the truth, and this is the line that we as a community put aside, right wing, left wing, whatever, because right now on these issues, we are on the same side, right? So we need to be more vocal on that. Now, the second part is on the side of the governments. We need to be, and this goes hand in hand, the Israeli diplomatic apparatus, right, need to be sharing more information and more proactively. So when something like in the UK with David Cameron happens, so that the parliament, the members of the parliament, and members of the House of the Lords have the actual facts to counter that, or to balance that, or to say, well, hold on, he said that, but we don't all think that. And I don't know that we are always doing that. And I think that at the same time, and this is the tough reality in which we live, we need to continue trying to do everything in our power, because this is the only thing we can uphold to, right? Which is our internal integrity and morality compass to, yes, provide the humanitarian aid in the best way that we can and to the best of our knowledge and ability, despite a super complex situation.
No, but in terms, I think last thought, and then we're going to let you go back to your important work, Olga. But I think what's very important, and this is what I'm concerned about, is that you're right, the day after has to involve better scrutiny and accountability of those so-called humanitarian aid organizations. The problem is, if they're all under the UN, which is inherently biased, corrupt organization, umbrella organization, how we're going to do that. And maybe this is really an appeal for all those good countries, all those countries that do care about both sides. Don't just give money without knowing where it's going. Thank you so much, Olga Deutsch.
Thank you for having me.